Hello there, my name is Mooseman, and today I will be informing you of whether you should play, wait, or avoid the grand strategy game by Paradox Interactive, Stellaris. As always, we will be looking at gameplay, aesthetics, future potential, and value before making our final verdict on the release version of Stellaris. Stellaris is a 4X real-time strategy game in which it is your objective to bring your species into the galactic community and hopefully make a name for yourself. You start out with a single planet, but expand through interstellar flight to other neighboring systems, where you can choose to mine, colonize, or terraform the planets. But, spoiler alert, you aren't alone in space, and deciding whether to conquer or band together with the other aliens is going to be your primary goal. If you have played any other real-time strategy 4X hybrid games like Sins of a Solar Empire, Stellaris leans more heavily on the 4X side of gameplay rather than RTS. While everything is done in real time, the only thing that is uniquely affected by real time is the ship combat and positioning. Each fleet of ships has a combat rating based on weapons, modules, and a leader bonuses which determines how strong your fleet is comparatively to other ships. Having a strong combat rating doesn't mean you'll win, however, as weapon and defense type can play a huge role in whether or not one ship can beat another. Most of the time you won't be in combat, however. Instead, you'll be spending time developing your single planet into a galactic superpower through diplomacy. Before you can start into space, however, you need to customize your empire. And believe me when I say that the strongest point in Stellaris is the amount of customization you can do to your empires and the variety of governing styles that are in the game. There are 15 unique forms of government that span pretty much every modern form and variation, including direct and indirect democracy, plutocratic and theocratic oligarchy, republic, monarchy, and of course, good old despotic empire, just to name a few. Each one of these government types results in a unique playstyle and individual rule set as to how you must control your citizens and how other civilizations with differing governing types respond to you. Not only can you designate a governing type, but you can also decide which ethics your civilization was founded on and the inherent traits that make up who your citizens are socially. Ethics determine how your society reacts to certain actions, so an ethically peaceful civilization may be a lot weaker than a militarist civilization, but the peaceful civilization will be trusted more implicitly during negotiations. Traits work in a similar way to The Sims, where you can select what your species excels at and what they are weaker at, resulting in minor stat boosts that may help them in the overall strategy of what you're trying to accomplish. The amount of customization in Stellaris gives the game an unprecedented amount of choice and possibility, to a point where playing a single game the exact same way is extremely unlikely to happen considering the thousands of possibilities just regarding which empire you choose. You can of course choose one of the default empires, but if you're like me and want to customize every aspect of your experience, you're free to do so. Any empires you create, you can also choose to include as possible AI empires, meaning if you want to set up a World War II in space themed game, you can make it happen. So let's get into the main game. You will be controlling two main maps, the galaxy map and the local system map. The galaxy map will be used most of the time when you are transversing between systems, while the system map will be used during combat and when you're building things on the surface. There are three forms of interstellar flight that you can choose from to go between the stars. The first one is warp drive, which allows you to go to any system within a small range, but at a relatively slow pace. Hyperspace travel is similar to warp drive, but you can travel much faster at the expense of being limited to traveling across preset hyperspace lanes. Wormhole travel is the absolute fastest, as you can be transported huge distances very quickly, but only if it's inside the range of one of your wormhole generators. If you end up losing a wormhole generator, all your ships will be stuck far from home. The combination of the galaxy map and the system map works really well in comparison to just having a single map with all of the information on it. Stellaris has a lot of information displayed at any one time, and being able to effectively find and move your ships between systems without having to search every single planet of every system for them makes it possible to get things done fast and efficiently. One of the key worries I had about Stellaris was how Paradox was going to make the game simple enough to allow for the fast RTS style movement without sacrificing depth of gameplay, and this two-map system has worked successfully in doing so. While it may seem like the galaxy map is just used as a way to look at the whole big picture, but I actually found myself commanding all my ships from the galaxy map as much as possible, and only going in close when I needed to manage a city or set up production. Once you get into space, you will need to start expanding to gather your resources and fund your empire. There are three main currencies in the game: energy credits, minerals, and influence. Energy credits are used to pay for all the maintenance throughout your empire. From buildings to ships to stations, everything has a monthly maintenance cost. Minerals are used solely for building and upgrading, and both minerals and energy credits can be mined from planets within your borders or produced in buildings on the surface cities. Influence, on the other hand, is arguably the most important currency, as it's what you use to directly expand your empire. Influence cannot be mined, but instead it represents your political legitimacy over your citizens. If you are seen as a strong, independent ruler who is rivals with all your neighbors, your influence will rise. If you join into a strong alliance instead, your influence will fall because you are seen as a weaker individual. Certain political leaders and sciences will expand your influence as well. Influence is spent on specialized buildings, hiring scientists, admirals, and other leadership positions, planetary edicts that temporarily improve your planetary output, and most importantly, expanding your borders into deep space by placing down frontier stations. I really like the way currency is done in Stellaris, especially in regards to influence, because it rewards smart, progressive growth outside of simply rushing outwards quickly. One issue that can occur in 4X games is that whoever gets established first and conquers the most land ASAP gains an instant advantage. While that advantage still exists in Stellaris, the consequences for expanding too quickly and draining your influence can cripple your empire if you aren't careful. And it was one of the first mistakes I made. What happened was that I chose the most warlike default faction for my first playthrough, and as a result I attempted to gather resources as quickly as possible and at any expense to build my army, which resulted in me draining my influence to the point where I couldn't hire any new scientists for researching new technologies. While rushing outwards quickly isn't advisable, you will still have to colonize planets gradually to expand your borders and income. Colonizing planets can produce buildings that provide huge amounts of resources when worked, and are also the only place you can build a shipyard, making them vitally important to building an army. Colonizing is done by sending a colony ship to an inhabitable planet and choosing a starting location, looking specifically for areas that have room for building. Each species has a preferred temperature and humidity, and while you can colonize less than ideal planets, your population won't grow as fast in addition to your citizens being unhappy. Unlike energy credit and mineral mines, a planet you want to colonize does not have to be inside your borders. Rather, colonizing a planet will cause the surrounding area to become your territory. Each empire can only effectively control a set number of planets. For democracies, it's 7 planets, and for everybody else, it's 5. While you can build mining facilities and expand your borders indefinitely using frontier stations, going over the set limit will inflict massive penalties as your government loses the ability to control all the territories. But that doesn't mean your empire is restricted to just that number. At any time, you can make a planet into a sector. Sectors are still part of your empire, but they are self-governing and make decisions based on what economic things to build independently of the player. The player is still responsible for the defense and the overall control of the region, but it's another way the game adds an additional challenge to uniting the entire galaxy under one banner that doesn't involve brute force. The science system in the game is unique in that instead of the usual tech tree, you are given 3 semi-random technologies that you can study per focus each time you finish researching a new technology. Each focus, physics, society, and engineering, all have separate sets of research resources that you must obtain by building special stations in orbit of research-rich planets. While this science system does make for some interesting diversity between the players in the game, it introduces a rather large amount of luck and unpredictability to the game that pretty much overrides any strategy or long-term planning. And this ends up being my biggest problem with the game. Everything you do in Stellaris is solely based on your science, from what you build to which planets you can colonize to the types of weapons you can use on your ship. Making it semi-random creates situations in which you are losing to other players, not because you made mistakes, but simply because you got an unlucky batch of sciences or made the unintentionally wrong choice. I say semi-randomly because some of the most important technologies the game gives you frequent opportunities to research. But when it comes to all secondary technologies, there's no guarantee on any specific time. For example, in the second game I played, I ended up getting in a scenario where I had no ship modules such as deflectors or armor, making my ships essentially paper airplanes. Did I have the opportunity to get them earlier and skip them for something else? Probably. but because of the random nature, I couldn't research them when I needed to. There ends up being no right choice when you are choosing a technology, because you're basically hoping that you get the ability to choose relevant technologies every single draw, when in reality, there are going to be some scenarios where you're researching things you just don't even need. The positive side to this system is that it further enhances the need for diplomacy. Combined with the checks against single player growth and the domination through influence currency, the fact that you cannot rush specific technologies creates a ton of scenarios where you need to rely on other empires to fill the gaps left behind in your own technology. This can be done through research agreements that increase the speed of research for technologies already known by one side of the agreement, or even in real combat scenarios. If you have a powerful laser cannon technology but no shields, and your ally has a great defensive armor but no powerful weapons, you can combine fleets to take down a common enemy. A non-combat example is that a player that has terraforming technology can help another ally terraform a potentially habitable planet, and the list goes on. But all these great cooperative scenarios are all things that really can't be done with AI and must be done in a multiplayer game. If you're playing single player, yeah, it's possible to group up with the AI, but it's obviously going to be way harder to take advantage of their strengths in comparison to what a real player can do. In addition to getting science technologies randomly, you also have the option to get specific special technologies by using science to go out on quests. Each time you scan a new system, there is a chance you can find an anomaly quest. These quests can provide you with secret technologies, enhanced science, and other random resources. While these quests will keep you busy for a while in the early game, they only hide a very critical issue with the game's pacing. One of the reasons I love turn-based 4X games is that in most of them you can determine how long games last by increasing or decreasing the length of time each turn represents. In games like Civilization, you could do a quick game in just a few hours, or a marathon game that takes weeks. In Stellaris, you don't have a choice. Because the game is in real time, progression is always going to be made at the same pace. What I've found is that for the first 40 years or so in-game, things are relatively fine in terms of pacing. You are busy exploring new areas, doing quests in those areas, meeting new civilization, etc. But once you've explored all the stars in your area, and most of the empires have settled into their territory, the game comes to a relative standstill. You will find yourself spending years in game sitting around doing nothing besides waiting for your 20th mineral mine to be done or waiting for more population to grow on your planets, and only very rarely going to war with another civilization. You can obviously start a war, but if you're trying to play a peaceful civilization or any race that isn't designed for war, you really have to rely on allies to do most of the work. And if you're playing single player, yeah, we already went over this, the AI just doesn't cut it. But don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the AI in the game is bad. In fact, the AI pulls some incredibly sneaky maneuvers on occasion. It's just impossible to truly team up or even fight with an AI in the way the game was designed for, as a PvP multiplayer experience. Having the AI in addition to multiplayer works well, but as a single player, it's just not enough. Another problem involving pacing is that outside the few late game dangerous class technologies, almost every technology in the game is just a stat improvement over something else. Granted, there are a few awesome technologies like harnessing aliens used as fighters, but overall I wish they had diversified the weapons a little bit more instead of just having the primary weapon improvements be slightly better versions of the previous weapon. The aesthetic in Stellaris is okay, but honestly it's not really anything spectacular. Going back to the great customization, there are 93 individual species you can choose from, with many of them having additional phenotype, color, and clothing options. Ship-wise, each ship has a different type of customization that results in changes in size and how many weapons you can hold, which also changes the layout of your ship. That being said, I was kinda hoping for a little bit more ship customization. At least a way to color your hull. It kind of feels weird fighting someone across the galaxy who is flying pretty much the same ship as you. One minor note is that the planets do not actually orbit the sun, and the ships are limited to a 2D plane in space rather than free 3D motion. I can understand the 2D, but the orbiting of the planets would have been nice, as it would have added a little more complexity and strategy to developing your systems. Performance-wise, the game has some strange choppiness in battle, and it's not just the enormous ones. Anything with more than 10 ships, which is still a really small battle, the game tends to freeze on and off, at least on my mid to high end system. Other than battles, the game seems to run almost flawlessly, but it should, as there's not really a huge amount of stuff going on screen except in battles. Future potential wise, I would like to see first and foremost some improvements in clarity on a few interactions. Frontier stations are a critical part of growing your empire. They are used to expand your boundaries without settling on a planet, allowing you to build mining and resource stations on non-inhabited planets. In order to keep empires from growing too rapidly, these stations take up one influence point per turn, meaning they are a huge drain on one of your most important resources, so it's important to delete them once your other boundaries grow to cover the area. The problem is that you pretty much just have to guess how much territory is covered by the station, and if you're wrong, you can lose control of entire systems. During my single player experience, anytime I felt like I could delete a frontier station, I would do a quick save and reload if I inadvertently lost something. But that generally doesn't go over well in a multiplayer game, and I would like to see a simple highlight of what the frontier stations actually cover added in the future. The terms of war being non-negotiable between allies is another problem. Upon declaring war as an alliance, the terms of war will be decided by whoever wants to declare the war. This ranges from liberating planets to complete takeover, but what will be done after the war is immediately decided during this key vote. The problem is that I've had allies who want me to go to war with another superpower, and then they offer me nothing for going to war with them and just take all the conquered cities for themselves. There needs to be a chance to amend the terms without declining, because declining costs you a pretty significant chunk of your reputation in your alliance. The last minor thing I would like to see changed in terms of interaction is that trade from AI doesn't tell you the information about the AI's empire. When I decide to trade with an AI, it shows what their friendliness is, their science level, their rivalries, which allows me to assess how I approach the trade deal. But when an AI initiates a trade, it only tells you the terms and agree or disagree. If an empire that's extremely inferior wants a research agreement, I want to ensure that I don't give it to them, but I only know their technology level by either remembering every single stat of every alien civilization in the game, or by opening a separate window and checking. Overall, it's not a big issue to open up a separate window and check, but it became enough of an annoyance to warrant me mentioning something. Completely removing the RNG-centered science system isn't something I think that should necessarily be done, but instead I would like there to be an option to use a predetermined tech tree as an alternative. Having the option to play the game with a planned long-term strategy is one of the reasons I play 4X games, and being restricted to only the current system is kind of disappointing in that regard. The game is priced at $40, which is, I think, a very fair price for the game. The amount of different governing styles alone gives the game loads of replayability, and although I dislike the science system, it does result in each game being very different and unpredictable each time. One of the problems with 4X games is that there's always a standard meta, and making one of the core mechanics in the game very unpredictable, I highly doubt there will be a meta formed easily in Stellaris. Whether or not you should play Stellaris really depends on what you are personally looking for in a strategy game. The game has tons of great options when it comes to diplomacy and empire customization, but the semi-RNG science system and slow pace can make it rather boring playing by yourself only after 1 or 2 games. It's a game that benefits a lot from playing with friends and playing for that diplomatic tension. In the end, if you're looking at a game with a lot of cool diplomacy options and opportunities for great multiplayer experiences, I would recommend that you play Stellaris. If you're looking for a single player experience, however, there are just better 4X games out there for that, and I recommend that you pass on Stellaris, or at least wait until the gameplay mods come out, as the game does have mod support from day one. Thank you for watching this episode of Play, Wait, or Avoid. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more news, reviews, and other gaming commentary. If you would like to see another review, the last review I did was for the music adventure game Tadpole Treble. If music games aren't your style, I also reviewed the game Nero, combination puzzle visual novel experience game.